Hi. Thank you all for joining us at the Navigating Virtual School at Home session. My name is Alana Sipple. I am a licensed social worker from Hemophilia of Georgia.
And my name is Kelly Baker. I am the parent of a child with severe type A hemophilia, and I'm also a member of the Western Pennsylvania chapter of the National Hemophilia Foundation. From this session, we recommend that you use the chat box to write any questions or comments that you may have. The speaker will respond in the chat throughout the session, or we will address it verbally with you. You can also email questions to the speakers using the Ask a Follow-Up question for a response at a later time. Make sure to give additional feedback at the end by filling out the evaluation. All of the presentations are recorded and will be available to watch online. I have no disclosures that I need to provide for the session. And I believe Alana has no disclosures as well. As I mentioned, I am a parent. My 6-year-old son, Jackson, was diagnosed with severe type A hemophilia when he was just 7 months old. I also am the mother of an unaffected 12-year-old daughter, Annalise. One thing with Jackson as well, he was also diagnosed with severe apraxia of speech when he was 3 years old. We planned the session a little differently this year due to what's happening in our schools with the COVID-19 pandemic. We wanted to use this time to just discuss challenges we're facing with decisions in sending our children back to school, but also to provide resources that may help in the decision making and what's best for your family. A lot of families are trying to find balance of working and teaching their children at home. I know personally, both my husband and I work full time, so it was very difficult the last springtime when the schools were closed, the kids had to be home, and we were both working full time. There were times that my employer did allow to work from home every other day. However, as we start the new school year, that hasn't been given as an option. So we're still waiting on our start of school plan personally. So there's a lot of uncertainty and anxiety that we're planning. And we get a lot of parents are going through that, trying to determine, what is the right choice for your family. A lot of the families are trying to balance working and teaching. That's the hardest part. So Alana is going to present later in our presentation some information on virtual and homeschool options. A lot of families, including my own, are hesitant in sending our kids back to the classroom, but I think what we all need to realize is that there are many options for learning available to us. The key is finding what is right for your family based on the educational needs of your children, health risks to your family, and really what you're comfortable with. For my daughter, Annalise, I would be completely comfortable with her learning virtually if in-person wasn't an option. But as a parent, with Jackson having apraxia and his bleeding disorder, still being so young, I feel that he has to be in front of his teachers. It's critical to his success, in school and learning and development. He's had a really difficult time not being with his teachers and his friends emotionally over the past couple of months. One thing I realized just last week, my husband and I were talking, we weren't really including our kids in the conversation. We were talking about what we wanted to do, what we thought was best for them. And it kind of hit me, our daughter is mature and responsible enough to make a decision, and she wants to go back into the classroom full time. We brought her into the conversation, and she communicated that she knows she has to wear the mask. She knows how to socially distance from others and how it's important to sanitize and wash your hands every day, as it's, something that we've been implementing in our household since March. As we talk about preparing and navigating through schools this year, I also encourage you to revisit IEP and 504 plans that you may have in place. Maintain open lines of communication with school personnel should virtual or homeschool be the option that you take. to see what modifications may need to be made in implementing and ensuring follow through of those plans. One of my concerns with Jackson, with his apraxia of speech is he still going to be able to have his learning? He has, some one-on-one learning with a teacher at his school. And that was my biggest concern. So I called, our school and I said, what are we going to do? I know we don't have the plan in place, but what is the plan for him to make sure his modifications are made? And they assured me it'd be top of mind and they would be working with us. So I encourage all parents to do that. And then as you start the school year and throughout, just maintain follow-up on those plans and making sure the goals are being met that you've set forth, as well as the modification. Now I would like to turn over to Alana to discuss resources available that could help you in deciding what is best for your family this school year.
Hi, so I have listed here resources that are broken up into particular age groups. You will see that some of them are repetitive because they actually are sites that have curriculum resources for all age groups, for example, the good and the beautiful. But I will give you a quick background on each of these just so you can have an idea of which ones may be best or most useful for your children. The HSLDA link is for a website or organization called Homeschool Legal Defense Association. What I found on this site is that they have links for homeschool laws, which is extremely important to follow to make sure that once your child gets to a point where they are testing or being evaluated to move on to the next grade or to graduate from school in general, that they've already met all of the requirements. When that's not the case, there can be a lot of challenges with making sure that the state will even recognize the child's education as suitable to move forward. So it's important to know those things ahead of time. This site also has grading outlines for parents who are, stepping into teaching for the first time. That is definitely a learned skill. And so it's fine that you don't know everything up front. This site particularly helps you learn how to grade effectively so that the children are getting adequate feedback and being prepared the best that they can be. There's also record keeping tools on this site that will help you stay organized and help you know when benchmarks are being met and what things probably still need to be worked on a little bit more than what they've mastered. Lastly, there's testing evaluation information on this site where it will help you understand what the benchmarks were for them to be tested on in order to move on to the next grade or level. It also gives you outlines for how to evaluate those things on your own. One of the sites that I put on here that works for all age groups or that has information for all age groups is the good and the beautiful. On here, there's curriculum, like I said, for every grade. And it's basically an outline. It's not the most specific, but you definitely, if you're able to generate ideas from other online resources like workbooks and or tangible resources for elementary school children, this curriculum is a really good outline because it leads the way and kind of sets you up to have room to be creative, but also understand what things you need to make sure you touch on. This site also has books, a list of books and links to books that can be used for leisure, but are still definitely hitting the needs of their literacy growth by grade level. Another site is EDX, which was created by MIT and Harvard. This one has study tools for college courses. And so this is probably going to relate most to high school students, probably upper high school, depending on the educational level for each student. I know there are some sophomores who take college courses. And so this will allow them to have resources and tools that give them the detailed steps for each type of subject. So for example, if they are taking AP literature, there are books or there are excerpts from textbooks that they can use that were actually being used at MIT and at Harvard to prepare them for AP or IB tests. The other website on here is called Coalition for Responsible Home Education. This site has teaching resources for all ages as well and all subjects. And it also updates every 5 minutes, which is extremely important because there are consistent changes with nonprofits and other types of organizations that want to provide resources to families in this time. And sometimes they run out of resources and sometimes new resources are opened up. And so because this site updates every 5 minutes, I found it really important to add on here so that you can have something that is like living and actually accurate at any point that you go to it. Another site on here that most are probably familiar with is K-12. It's generally available at all Board of Education websites for every city. And this site will give students the opportunity to take charge of their education by combining online and in-person learning. They have a very personalized approach, and then they also offer tuition-free online public schools. So if it is something that you are thinking of doing, homeschooling your child, but you don't personally feel comfortable with being the teacher or instructor, this site will help you find networking opportunities for homeschool. So it will connect you with teachers who are getting or using their abilities to do online teaching for free, or other families that are in the homeschooling network that feel more comfortable with doing the instruction piece, and your child can be strictly online through a public school system. It also has resources that are particular to military families. That's extremely important, and also STEM students, so that they can have very personalized study paths. Another site on here is called Power My Learning. This site has online workshops for families. So they give advice for setting up home learning routines. Routines is going to be something that you find to be extremely important. I know in stepping into homeschooling, one thing that can feel overwhelming is that parents feel that they may have to teach as long as children are in school. That's not the case. You can definitely look this up on your own, but there are much shorter teaching times suggested for students once they are homeschooled, which I believe for elementary school, it's between like 2 to 3 hours, and then it kind of grows, but softly from there for up to high school. It's definitely not a whole 8-hour day. And so this site definitely helps you to create routines that can keep you in that span of what is actually an effective amount of time for children to learn. It acknowledges and helps you manage anxiety, which I'm sure is something that everyone could probably relate to on different levels during this time, particularly if you're stepping into teaching for the first time. This has some resources for, dealing with and managing your mental health. It also has online learning resources in reading, math, and science. The last option on this slide is called Ambleside, and this site offers free curriculum that is designed to be as close as possible to the curriculum used it's called Charlotte Mason, and that they have a set of schools, and they have a very high focus on literary standards. And so if reading comprehension is something your child struggles with, or something that you particularly want to focus on, this is a great site for that. They also have really quality books that cost no more than really in a really inexpensive textbook, and some of them are free as well. You just have to search the site for them. So they have some free online books that are textbooks, but then also books for just leisure reading. And we can go to the next slide. So here I wanted to offer some technical and financial support resources. One thing that I know is going to be a challenge for a lot of families is supplying their children with what they need technologically. Beyond books, I think books sometimes can come a little easier than like laptops or iPads and things of that matter. And so there are some sites that I've found that are offering discounts for laptops, and also refurbished laptops, or refurbishing help for laptops you may already own. The first one is Notebooks for Students. This one I think is really cool because it was formed by a group of college students and faculty in LA. So they were having their own trouble with their laptops and finding affordable laptops, and so they thought to make this website for other people having that issue. So this site particularly will connect you with places and organizations that can help with refurbished laptops or refurbishing the one that you already own. And the mission for this site is to provide affordable, dependable, powerful laptops for all students. They provide assistance for servicing your laptops, and they also have decreased cost for servicing them and also free warranties. They also create a program to, they start at the beginning of every school year, and it's a nonprofit. So they definitely have lower costs than most places that would charge to fix or supply you with a laptop. And then they're also, because they're focused on doing this for students, their plan for COVID-19 has been adjusted to fit lower income families and offer assistance in that way. HSLDA, what I mentioned earlier for curriculum, also has some resources for this. They have curriculum and school materials, homeschool courses, but then also school-related technology. So they offer diagnostic testing and therapies for children with special needs, but they are the ones who will supply the technology required for that. And then another source that they have here is that they offer grants. There's typically a few $100s per homeschool child in one home. And that can change based on your family size and circumstances. So that would be something you'd have to ask particularly of them to know how that would work for your family size. And then the requirements to be considered for the Compassion Curriculum Grant, which is the grant that they offer, is that you must have completed at least one semester of homeschooling immediately prior to applying. So what that means is if we're stepping into fall 2020, once fall 2020 is over, you are able to apply for this for spring 2021 for your child. It has to be, you have to be homeschooling at least one child between 6 and 19 years old. You must have legal custody of the child that you're homeschooling. You must be able to show significant financial need, which is generally shown through either a tax form or a form that states that you have no or low income. And then you must be able to provide character references, and what that looks like would have to be asked of them as well, because that can definitely shift based on organization to organization. Lastly, you have to create a free account with them, which just takes a couple of minutes. I actually made one for myself. Another resource that I found is called Medium. They have general links to resources in different states. So I want to say that it's all 50 states, and it may not be, but it is quite a few states on there. And basically each state has at least, I think, 3 to 4. Some only had one, but most of them had about 3 or 4 resources under each that can connect you to funding, resources, or technological devices that you may need for your child in every single state. So it's extremely specific and important because we have this need across the country. Another site is called Journeyed, and it is basically an online book resources for study tools and curriculum. And they also sell technology on there. I saw that they had iPads, they had laptops, and then Kindles as well. And lastly, I added the Academic Superstore, which is software for all subjects. So there are certain software they had on there that was for math. I know there was reading. There was even some for like elective classes like music and art, because it's extremely important to still kind of keep their minds going outside of their core subjects while they are being homeschooled. And so I think that that's a wonderful resource as well. We can go to the next slide. So here I wanted to just give some tips about how to communicate with kids, particularly during a crisis. I'll stay focused on COVID, but these are general rules for that. Basically, when speaking with children, some things to remember is to be objective as far as just hitting bullet points. I think depending on the child's age, kind of overstimulating them with information can make it hard for them to pick out what's important to take away. So you want to start with the takeaways with younger children. So wearing masks, washing your hands, those are like the main things that they need to make sure that they are always doing. And so starting there and then making sure you end there is really good, because it points it out as the most important piece. When talking about the more specifics about how to handle this crisis, things like protecting and caring for each other is extremely important for children to understand. For younger children, I definitely would suggest mentioning people who they can connect to personally. So the next point says considering those who may be high risk and or elderly. So for example, if I'm talking to my child who may be 6 years old and I'm saying, we don't just wear masks for ourselves, we wear them for other people. Using their grandmother who may be an elder would help them to connect to why it is important to protect people whoever are of an older age. Some children are able to connect with you just saying older people have a high risk of being sick, or people with asthma or people with immune diseases have a higher risk. But if they know someone with asthma, or if they know someone with an immune disease, then that makes it more real for them. And it's important for children to be able to tangibly connect to rules and to suggestions in order for them to walk it out. Um, Another thing that's extremely important is to be prepared to confront their worries. Um, I think for adults, sometimes just kind of walking out the objectives is like, okay, got it, good. Children's minds are extremely imaginative, and they're not always as straight to the point as ours. And so they can have some worries that we wouldn't even think of. So I think being prepared and making enough time to address those worries are important. We definitely want to lessen the anxiety as much as possible in this time. And so making space for that conversation, making enough time for that conversation would definitely help with that. And then providing them with practical reminders kind of pulls them out of their imagination kind of running wild with how this can affect them or their families. We want to make sure they know that this is serious, but we don't want them to live in fear, if that makes sense. And so just being prepared to confront that practically would help. Another thing that I would suggest is revamping activities to create space of normalcy. So I think a lot of people have been calling this a new normal, and it is. And so, for example, if your family is used to going out and doing something publicly on a consistent basis, maybe recreating that experience in the home would be helpful. And it doesn't have to be extravagant. If your family's used to going to the movies, maybe having a movie night that, you have someone selling popcorn or, just to have the environment set up to where it feels like you're actually at a movie theater. That helps to create normalcy for your children. Children are extremely resilient, but they do need to be addressed when there's change versus just there being change and then them not having any type of explanation. That is not a good way to handle shifts for children. And so we want to address the fact that something's changing, and we want to help to make that feel as normal as possible. And so incorporating some activities that they love or that they enjoy with their family or friends is really good, in the safest way possible. Lastly, listen to their concerns. That kind of speaks to the, confront their worries. But children are experts on themselves. That's kind of the ground rule for social work. Everyone's an expert on themselves. But when they are expressing their concerns about this time, whether that is what they feel about missing school or missing friends or missing teachers or things like that, it is important that we don't just kind of play that to the left as like, oh, they're just kids. Even with the little bit of information they generally have, they are still experts on what they feel. And so we want to make sure that we're acknowledging what they feel and supplying them with a response that is, patient, but then also very much so directly addressing their thoughts and their feelings. We can move forward. So this slide is just a few more resources that I found that I think would be helpful. How to Smile, I'll just give overviews for these ones, but How to Smile just has a list of like museums and planetariums and aquariums and home activities that are good for children. This kind of speaks to revamping their environment experiences. These places that they give are places that are open, but are also having, lines drawn and rules for respecting and keeping everyone safe during COVID. And so this is a good resource, I believe, if you're willing to take your child somewhere to make their learning more tangible or more interactive. And then they also have online resources for ways to make their learning process at home more exciting, which also would be really important for younger students who need tangibles when they are learning, things that they can actually touch in their hands. So not having all of their education online, but also having like workbooks and things that they can physically write with, or taking them somewhere to see what they're learning in person. Home Fires has a directory of homeschool organizations. And so I was speaking earlier about homeschool networks. That helps to kind of ease the burden from a lot of parents who may not feel comfortable in every subject or may not feel comfortable teaching at all. This website will help you find in your particular state networks that are helpful for that. Time for Learning tells you the homeschool laws, which again are extremely important, and just general information for homeschooling by state. And then lastly, A to Z Homeschooling has vendors for special needs homeschooling curriculum. So students who have IEPs or 504s, this is the site for you because it will, based off of the particular special needs of your child, it will direct you to curriculum that will be helpful for them. I'm going to go ahead and direct it back to Kelly.
I think that now, Chelsea, we can open it up for questions if there are any in the chat. Also, if you have any questions for Alana or myself, for the parent perspective, I could share that. Please put it in the chat and Chelsea will hand those off to us.
Yeah, so we do have one question so far. It was regarding if either of you know of any resources on how to address children's worries over COVID. So outside of the ones that you presented, if there are any others.
As far as directly addressing their worries, I mean, really, it's hard to answer because you don't know until you're in the moment what their particular worry is. So I can't, give like an answer. But what I can say, kind of ground rules, are to listen really well, not interrupting them. And the funny thing is the way that we listen to children definitely like mirrors the way that we have good listening skills with adults. So definitely listening carefully, not interrupting them, and then directly responding to their worries. Sometimes when we listen to children, we can downplay what they're concerned about because it's not something we would be concerned about. And so we move on to something else, but directly address what they said in a very practical way, but in a way that makes them feel heard.
And I know with Jackson, I assumed through all of this, just being 6 years old, he was fine with everything. And then it was probably middle of June and he was getting ready, for bed one night and he truly had a breakdown and, that's not him. He is a happy-go-lucky little guy. And he says, I miss my teachers. I miss my school. I miss my friends. And it was kind of eye-opening because I've been sheltering him. We try to keep things, as Alana said, doing things at home and keeping them busy. So, I did reach out to some of his parents and we had, a socially distanced play date. We had them on FaceTime with each other. His school did open up some small summer camps that were just 2 hours a day. And he's done about 3 of those already just to get him back on his school campus. And they're very, very safe with it. But, just listening to them and seeing truly what they need. And at that point, I knew he needed to see his friends and talk to his friends and see some familiar faces at school. So, I had to overcome my fear because I didn't know how comfortable other parents were. So I reached out to a couple that I thought would be okay with them playing and it worked out. So yeah, truly listening. I think that's the key, listening to what the concern is to see how we can help them.
Also, I would add to that in an effort to give them exactly what they need, obviously with the parameters of safety, literally saying, what do you need is important. Sometimes children know how to express what they feel. And I think the parents can tend to take the role of deciding how to fix that. But some children are very aware about what they need in that moment. And so when they're expressing their worries or their fears, following up after you're listening with, what do you need to help you or how can I help you? It gives them autonomy and it allows them to kind of take responsibility for their own desires and their own help. And then addressing that in the best way is another tip that I would give
Chelsea, are you seeing anything else in the chat?
At the moment, I do not see any other questions. But we definitely can wait a minute and see if anyone puts anything in the chat.
You want to bring up the next slide? We could talk about that.
Yeah, sure. 1 second.
So while we wait on some other, questions to come in, we just wanted to touch base on this. It's just to take a few minutes to fill out the session evaluation. We always ask everyone to leave, your honest feedback that helps shaping the sessions for next year. So you should get an email. I got an email this morning for the sessions, I attended yesterday to fill that. Remember, when you are doing that, you can be entered into the raffle by completing those evaluations.
You have another question. So the question is, do you have any tips on switching between being a parental role and an educator role? Any boundaries to be set?
I think I learned from our head of school during the spring. She had Zoom meetings for just parents when we were home, and kind of talked us through that, because we as parents, we want to push them to do their best, and kind of we might have some higher expectations, I found, than what the school did. And she said, give them a break. If it's not working out, if they're not getting it and how you're educating them, give them a break. Let them, walk away, because that's what they would do at school. So that would be my recommendation, and, reach out to those professionals. I think Alana hit on it, greatly when she talked about the time that they would be spending if they are learning at home, because that was very eye-opening. I thought my kids, would be hours, they're in school that long. Why aren't they learning that much at home? But they're able to do what they needed to in a much shorter period of time. So definitely talk to your educators and the principal, teachers, and see what, their thoughts are. But I think it was really taken back. If they need a break, give them a break, kind of look at how you're presenting it. Because in our house, I was the teacher. My husband was a teacher. Grandpa was a teacher some days. So, it was, my son had a different teacher every day, rotating through the week. So it was probably more stressful on him. So we tried to really go with how he was feeling and what he was adapting to. So just really reading your child.
So let's see, there are no other questions in the chat. That was a great question and great answer.
We thank everyone for attending, and Alana gave us so many great resources that I know I'll personally look at for myself too. So thank you. Thanks for Chelsea for helping with everything, and Alana, thank you for all of your valuable knowledge and resources.
For sure. Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you everyone for joining. I wish everyone the best of luck with transitioning into education or setting your child up for homeschooling.